Hello. Now to finish this part about using mocks, I wanted to read this nice article by Martin Fowler on MocksArentStubs. Okay, so I'm gonna just introduce you a little bit to the article and have some questions left. Leave some questions for you so that you by reading it try to answer these questions. Okay. The first thing is that I want to is so you have these test doubles, okay, uh, and there are different types of test doubles, okay. We talk about mocks, but there are other types, and basically this article distinguishes between mocks and stubs, or even distinguish what is the impact of using mocks when you develop your software and do your testing, okay? And I think that's the interesting part. So, but you have, for instance, dummy objects that basically are objects that are only there for parameters, so you don't interact with them, but so you don't need to create them, okay? So basically they are just used to fill parameters lists. Then you have fake objects, which actually they are almost fully functional, but usually you use them because they provide a nicer environment for test. For instance, one example is in-memory database. So instead of using a real database, you just use an in-memory database. Actually, is what you are doing when you do when you run our tests in the project. We use an in-memory database, but actually so it depends on the profile. This is defined on the profile. So when you are running in the test profile, you use the in-memory database, so which is a fake object. And when you just run the server, launch the server using the Maven Spring Boot start, you actually are using the real Postgres database. Okay. Then you have stubs that provide canned answers to calls during the test. So basically, a stub is actually a real object that only implements the type of behavior I want to have. Okay, so doesn't implement any. So you interact with it, and it just you invoke method A, and it gives you the response that you need for that test case. Okay, then you have spies that, on top of stubs, also record some state. So this is nice. Spies is nice, for instance, when you test an email server, when you are interacting with an email server, and actually what you do is that you just store the emails you send, and afterwards you can go inside and see what was sent, to see that actually all this information was sent. Okay. And then you have mocks that we've been talking about. And so the mocks is a bit different in the sense what the object doesn't exist really. What you are defining is the behavior. So you have this external entity you are interacting with, and you are defining the behavior of these interactions. So in some sense, what you are saying is that, okay, my object is interacting, invoking that methods, and you are describing the behavior of that methods. Okay? So basically it's a way to describe. So if you think in terms of an interaction diagram, is you are describing the behavior of the object you interact with. Okay? This can be a bit too heavy, in the sense by describing this behavior, if you change some of the behaviors of the interactions, you need to refactor of your tests, and maintaining the tests can be something costly. But some frameworks like Spock have some nice things like strict mocking and non-strict mocking, and most of people does non-strict mocking, in the sense that if you do not describe all the interactions, he accepts the interactions. So which means that you can only describe the interactions that are relevant for the things you want to test. So you don't need to describe everything, okay? Because if you describe everything, your test case is really coupled, really dependent on the particular interaction of this particular implementation of the unit you are testing. Okay, so I'm going to leave you now the questions you should study this document. One is about, I'm going to explain something before that is relevant. There are two approaches when you use mocks. Look, suppose in our case, so you have the service and you have the domain entity. Which do you test? Which do you implement first? Actually, I'm implementing everything at once. But you could just decide, look, I'm going to implement the service first, and I mock all the invocations of the service. This is called outside in. So usually I implement my code from the outside, from the functionality, and step by step I'm going into the kernel of the code. And before I get to the kernel of the code, I create mocks, and I test, and then I replace the mock by a real implementation, and that's a way to develop software, okay? That's a way to look at it. It's a bit strange, but if you think, it would be something like you have done in human interfaces. You start with prototyping, and then, yes, you prototype, you mock everything, so you only have the interface, you mock everything below, and then, okay, then you start replacing the mocks by the real objects, the business logic, and then you finish in the database, okay? Another approach that does not use mocks is to go from the domain model to outside. So the first thing you implement and test is the domain object model. So you domain, in our cases, you implement the course and then you implement the services and go on. In that case, you don't, in some sense, you do not need mocks, because actually what you do, you test, you implement first the units that are more independent. Afterwards you don't do really unit testing, because actually you are already interacting with other objects. So when you test the service, you are using other objects. But it's another way to go. And they provide quite different ways approaches to develop software. So, but the questions I want you to look at is, the first thing is actually, by using mocks, look, something that occurs, you have the setup of your test. What is the impact of using mocks in the setup of the test? Is it simpler? It is easier to maintain the setup of the test with mocks or not? And I would like you to look at it, okay? The second thing is test isolation, okay? To see how can I achieve test isolation with this type, whether using mocks or not. So what is the difference? So, and then the coupling of tests to the implementation. Because look, when you use mocks, in some sense, you are knowing about the interactions with the other objects. So if you change the interaction, so you are testing an object, right? But look, by invoking this object, you are mocking how this object interact with the other one. So in your test, you are aware of the implementation. So if the implementation changes, although the behavior is the same, you need to redefine. So it's costly to maintain. So as I told you, sometimes mocks can be something that is not nice, okay? It depends on the problem you want to solve. Of course, as I told you already, if you use strict mocking, if you do not use strict mocking, then you have so you don't specify everything, you only specify what is relevant. So it's something that you need to decide. And the last question is, what is the impact on the design style? So whether if I use mocking, do I design my system in a different way? And what you are gonna know is about a law called the Demeter law, which is from the 90s or 80s. And it's very interesting to see how the approach you use to write your tests may, in some sense, bias, and I'm not saying bias in a necessarily wrong way, but yes, bias the way you design your code. So good read and good work. See you.